Hello and welcome to the first episode of Societal's brand new podcast, Chatting Change. I'm your host, Charlie Ashby, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest topics of the past few years. Yep, that's right, it's Brexit. If you don't already know or have been avoiding newspapers for the past 3 years, Brexit is the term used for the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, which is set to occur this March. So joining me today to discuss how Brexit will affect supply chains, logistics and more, Societal's director, Liam Fassam. How are you, Liam?
I'm very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing alright, yeah. It's a pretty interesting day today. We'll talk about Brexit, considering what's going on.
It is.
It's the 15th of January today, so if you're listening back in time, you understand which day it is we're talking about. The Brexit vote should be going ahead today, right? For the bill.
Well, I hope so. We need to get some sort of resolution for businesses to be able to get ready for, I think, what is 49 days away now?
Oh, God.
Or potentially.
It gets closer, doesn't it? It feels like yesterday. It was the vote 2016, right? So what, 3 years has gone past?
Is it 3 years?
3 years of Brexit.
I thought it was only 2 years. There you go. I've lost a year somewhere.
Yeah, definitely, because we had Trump as well. Not long now until that starts kicking off again. All the
It's like Groundhog Day.
yeah, election. Well, that's a good start. So I guess the first question I was going to ask is how will Brexit affect supply chains?
Yeah, long pause while I think
Yeah.
of exactly which part of the supply chain you want to talk about. We could actually, one of the things when we were looking at doing this is I was going to ask how long it would take actually. So if we actually broke down every single supply chain that would be affected by Brexit, I think we could actually turn this into a series of podcasts that would last for eternity, because there are so many ways that this could have positive and negative effects on supply chain. A lot of the research that have been undertaken recently looks at negative aspects. I am racking my brain now trying to think of a positive one, and I'll try and come up one by the end of it. I suppose the biggest, most fundamental way it will affect the supply chain will be through visibility. And it is a very boring and a very overused set of terms, but visibility is the thing that makes the supply chain work. And without visibility, you can't do simple things like see where orders are or track stock coming in and communicate with suppliers and customers alike. So therefore, your business becomes a bit strained. Once something like Brexit, and I suppose if we remove a little bit the emotion from it and call it a geopolitical risk, because that's what this is. Anytime there's some sort of geopolitical risk, and you touched on Trump earlier on today, so along with the American politics or UK, European politics or Russian politics or Asian politics, when there's a geopolitical risk across borders, there's a risk that you can no longer see the information behind that border.
Yeah.
And once you can't see that, you become blind in supply chain. And effectively, you are ordering by fluke. You're hoping that the goods will turn up. You're hoping that your forecasts are correct. You're hoping that the warehouses will be full. So that's the first and most fundamental issue with Brexit or geopolitical risks.
I think you made a really good point about taking the emotion out of it, because obviously we're all people. We've got our thoughts and dreams and ideas of what should be, but you got to really think about the logistics and the actual facts about it too, because it must be very hard to not know what's going. If you don't know what's going on, then what are you supposed to do? And then I'm sure that gets politicised its own little way, you're just saying this because blah 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 blah, or does that make it more frustrating?
I think it's the most frustrating piece about Brexit, say it again, or this is the fact that there is a lot of emotion attached to it. So rather than being maybe I am being a bit too black and white and cold about this, but if you be objective about this, it doesn't matter whether we're in or out, what political party is driving this, you still need food in the cupboards. You still need a supply chain to work, right? So the supply chain is apolitical, it stands by itself, but it gets affected by political decisions. And when these decisions are made, nobody is making any forecasting or attempt at forecasting what may happen. A great example was this week where a large amount of money was spent driving trucks around an airfield in Manston because we think the border is going to clog up. Now, that's, to be quite frank, as much use as a chocolate teapot. That's not solving the problem. All we're doing is saying instead of there being a bottleneck at the port, we're going to move the bottleneck to a disused airfield in North Kent. And we could effectively move it up towards the Midlands if we want to, where a lot of the stuff's end destination when they turn the trucks around. It's not dealing with the bottleneck. You're just moving it into some other area and making it someone else's problem. So we seem hell bent on that. And again, we're 48 days away from a potential leaving the European Union, and we're still trying to drive trucks around and work out what the bloody hell we're going to do with the queue. So it doesn't make sense to me. So, and if we take it if we think about it from a supply chain, some of the supply chains I've worked in, especially some of the food ones, we could be ordering a month to 3 months ahead for stock that's coming in. I don't know how any of the supply chains at the moment in the UK are ordering past. When are we supposed to be leaving? Is it March?
Yeah, March.
Yeah, so past March. So the next quarter 2 forecast. How anyone is doing a quarter 2 forecast in business right now is beyond me, and I take my hat off to them, because how can you? How can you possibly predict what the lead time of a lettuce from Spain to England is going to be come March? You can't.
Oh, yeah.
It's all subjective. It's that's the most frustrating piece.
I never even thought about that, really. Like the whole sort of forecasting in the head and sort of trying to figure out what's going to happen there must be very difficult for loads of businesses. I guess worldwide as well, right?
Only exporting, but then there's an argument to say it's not really going to affect it. I mean, as we're doing this, I can see a freight train driving past the window, or traveling past the window. But most of that stuff's coming in deep sea from Asia. That won't get affected by Brexit. Well, some people may say it will, but I don't think it will, because this stuff's a relationship we have with Asia that's coming in. So that supply chain's not going to change. So a lot of your dry goods, high-tech goods that's coming in by air or by deep sea, not touching Europe, is going to be okay, and you can forecast that. It's more the short sea stuff. So if you look at food, 54% of the stuff we consume is grown in the UK. It means 48% is trucked in. Most of that comes out of Europe. So there's going to be a significant impact on fresh produce, and forecasting will be difficult, but not impossible. Because from day one, the second you know you've got an extra day on top, you'll carry more fresh product in the supply chain. What it might do, though, is it might push us back in time to those days where we didn't have strawberries all year round and lettuces all year round, because it now carries a risk of obsolescence and waste in the supply chain. So if you add another couple of days on top of a fresh supply chain, it only means you've now got a day to sell it. So you run into issues there around product availability, and it could become prohibitively expensive for the supermarket to sell it. So it's actually, we're not going to bother doing it. Or you find another way to bring it in, so you have to expedite the supply chain. So instead of trucking it from Spain, you fly it from Spain, which has a net increase on the cost. So it becomes socially becomes an issue, because only rich people can afford to buy strawberries now in the winter. Because there's a real trade-off between what you would do as a grocer or a supermarket in the supply chain.
So unless you're Wimbledon, you're probably not going to get some strawberries.
And arguably Wimbledon should be able to grow. If we get a decent weather in the UK, which Brexit clearly, one thing in this country can't be blamed for is the weather. You should be able to self-sustaining local supply chains would be able to sort Wimbledon out, hopefully. But it would have an effect on product availability year round for some of the fresh products, import and export.
Is there any positives you think that could come from Brexit?
I'm still struggling over that one. I'm trying to be as balanced as I can with this. If I take a business view from this, and if I look at food, which is my key research area, I struggle to see positives because of the fact that if we go for a no deal, and bear in mind a lot of this is based on a no deal Brexit, the absolute catastrophe. If we go for a no deal Brexit, we have no visibility of databases in Europe to protect supply chains from fraud, for example. So I can't spin that in any way as a positive. Yes, we might be able to sell cheese direct with China at a better tariff rate than we're selling now. But actually, if you look at the export numbers for products from the UK with Europe versus other players in the world, it's minuscule. I mean, Europe is our biggest trading partner. So I struggle to see how breaking deals and ties with your biggest trading partner can have anything but negative. I can't see a positive.
I mean, as well, like you were saying, if we're weakening the supply chain itself in terms of Brexit, not having access to security measures could damage it for quite a while, right?
Yeah, if you get some sort of shock in the supply chain happen, I mean, there may become a point where a supplier outside of the UK says, you know what, quite frankly, it's too risky to do business with the UK now. Not just from a security perspective and from a payment terms. Because if currency with geopolitical risk, and that's what this is, currency fluctuations is a massive issue around supply chains. So all of a sudden, it's uneconomical to trade with the UK. It's all over the place. It becomes a bit like China, where the currencies are. I'm not suggesting it will become like that, but they have to devalue their currency almost on an annual basis just to keep the country going. I mean, that's the nature of the beast over there.
It's not plain sailing.
Not well, I wouldn't suspect it is. No.
So let's just talk about like the worst case scenarios, or just in general, like if there's no deal. What can businesses do to make sure that the transition will go as smoothly as possible?
It depends what your market is. I mean, if you're there's an argument to say if you're wholly beholden to importing goods, the most smooth transition you could make is to relocate your business out of the tariff into a tariff-free zone. I'm not suggesting that what you should do, but that's one course of action you could take. Which means, and a lot of producers in the UK are actually looking to do that because they're export markets and they don't want to get into tariffs on products that are already low margin. So it's going to erode the margins. So why would they do that? So they're already looking at it. I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could look at a couple of examples. One recent one that we've been looking at in food for DEFRA is the amount of workers that are European in the supply chain. So the food supply chain, 33% of the workers are European nationals. They contribute £4.9 billion per year to HMRC. So I suppose the biggest thing employers need to do is protect their supply lines from and their resource in terms of being able to manage product through the supply chain. So effectively, no deal Brexit comes along, European workers decide to leave or have to leave or whatever it may be. We end up with 33% of the supply chain is basically unstaffed, unmanned. I mean, how would you then get food to the shops? 1/3 of that supply chain is gone. And that's the same in every aspect of logistics. There's a high propensity of workers that are European nationals. So I suppose the biggest thing is protecting against that. And that is not an overnight fix because you've got to get people in and get them trained up. There's also a perception about the industry. Logistics is always seen as a bit of a cold, damp warehouses, quite poorly paid, which isn't at all. There's some really good jobs in there, but there's a piece of work or a job of work that the government and the stakeholders need to do around raising the perception of the industry. You could say that needs to be done when people are sort of 10, 11 years old and starting to think about jobs and careers and stuff they're doing at school. So we've almost got a 5 or 6 year lead time into this, so we can't fix the problem immediately. And for all these people that suggest for 1 second that you just put all the unemployed people into these jobs, well, that's a fallacy as well, because the warehouses are not located in the areas of deprivation in the UK where the jobs are, and a lot of those people that are unemployed are unable to do logistics work because of the times of the shifts and the type of work it is. So it really isn't a case of exchanging one set of numbers with another set of numbers. People really haven't done the homework on that.
So really, like the whole sort of idea that, oh well, we've got a bunch of UK people who are unemployed because of, like, I know there's a lot of like newspapers saying stuff like, oh, because EU workers come here to take the jobs, when really we could have done a better job at sort of educating younger people and sort of getting them involved.
And a lot of the jobs aren't suitable for everyone. If you take a single mother, for example, who needs to get up, get the kids to school during the day, and then if the government's saying they must go to work and find a job, a lot of the logistics facilities, their jobs start at 6 o'clock in the morning, or the jobs finish very late at 10 o'clock. If you're a parent, single mother or single father or whatever you are, it is impossible for you to maintain parenting and a job in the logistics industry on your own. When there's two of you, you can. So a lot of the people that are looking for work can't actually, because of the social situation, do this work. So it's quite difficult. It really isn't a like-for-like case. You don't take one out and put one in. It's not what people would think.
How do you reckon we solve this problem then? Do you reckon that the government will sort of take that into account and listen to people when they say, well, actually, we need to sort of solve this problem? Or would it be another case of, well, just you got to do the job?
I don't think it will. I don't think the government are even aware it exists as a problem, to be quite frank with you. It's the fact that we're sleepwalking into the perfect storm. And again, 48 days away, we're talking about, are there going to be workers to drive bread to the supermarket shelves? We're not, where are these workers going to come from? Where's the food going to come from? They certainly wouldn't have looked at where the workers are going to come from. So I don't want to discredit them too much, but there's nothing I've seen that's talked about skills replenishment or replacement. And it's such a long lead time to turn this around. It is physically impossible to backfill that 1/3 in the food industry overnight. Is effectively what we're saying.
It's a shame, really, because there's so many sort of experts in these different industries telling you that this is what we need to solve, and I guess when it comes down to it, just ignore it. But so much could have been solved way before Brexit, right? Like if we just had this education subset.
Yeah, there's a big thing around the logistics industry. It's always been, obviously I'm biased because that's where I come from, but it's always been an issue about attracting talent and retaining talent into the industry. I think they're trying to do a lot. In fairness to the government, they are doing a lot of work around higher apprenticeships now and the whole apprenticeship levy with workers. There's arguments around how successful that's been, but you've got to say any step is a step in the right direction, so at least they are doing something. You could say that it's too little too late, but at least, again, they are doing something. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the answer is. There are no silver bullet answers to this. That's for sure. There are none, and historically the industry has always relied on a high percentage of migrant workers to support the business. And if we look at the amount of haulage firms that are bringing stuff into the UK, a lot of the international hauliers now, or the traffic that goes international, are international hauliers. There's very few UK-based international hauliers, and that's been something that's been happening for a number of years now. So we're reliant on a lot of international companies to supply us. So there's also that aspect of things as well. So we're actually, it's not like we have a plethora of trucks sat on a dockyard looking for work. They would have been pushed out of work, English hauliers, a long time ago. So there is a whole reliance on international logistics that I don't think has been considered.
Well, if we just take a step back from sort of logistics for a moment, and then what I wanted to ask you is, how do you reckon Brexit will affect funding and research?
I think there will be an initial hit on research. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think anyone really has modelled that or fully understood what's going to happen. The government have said that they'll honour research commitments that we have with the Commission for a number of years post leaving Brexit. The biggest challenge we're going to have is the ability to knowledge transfer. So there's a huge danger that even if we get a backfill of money to cover research, we could be replicating research that's being done elsewhere in Europe and beyond, which quite frankly is a waste of money, isn't it? If I'm researching something here in Northamptonshire and someone else is researching the same thing in Munich, we could collaboratively be researching on that and getting better results because we're comparing two different regions. So there's that element of it. I suppose when you look at a positive, you asked for a positive on Brexit earlier. I suppose one way to look at it is it could shake up the research process. So it could force us to look at alternative ways of researching. So instead of relying on certain streams of research from Europe, research institutes need to think about boxing a little bit smarter and maybe doing more empirical business-funded research to backfill, changing the way, becoming more entrepreneurial, creating enterprises that inside the university that create income. That income then gets channeled back into research. So as much as I really don't want to lose the European connections with research, I think that's not necessarily a doomsday scenario. I think there's ways around that. And I also believe from an academic perspective, and there's a lot of pragmatism within the sector, that the ties that we've created over the number of years that we've been working with Europe, they won't be broken. We'll still work together. It just might not be as overt as before.
Okay, cool. So you think that sort of like, if we're boxed in by Brexit, and sort of have to rely on our own selves when it comes to research, we could come up with sort of new enterprises and stuff like that. Do you reckon that could help with unemployment as well in the UK?
It could. If we do a lot of spin-off entrepreneurial businesses, it could absolutely do that. I mean, so there's an argument to say that, again, looking for a positive, if the UK becomes a bit of a haven for taxation purposes. And don't tie me up too much in knots on this because I am not an economist. That's not what I do. But if you did become quite favourable, so for example, a Luxembourg. Luxembourg is very favourable on taxation, and you only have to take a trip around Luxembourg to see that the biggest financial institutions in the world are housed there, and consulting companies, for one reason only, because they can pay less tax.
Yeah.
I mean, Amazon's head office are there, for example. So if the UK became more favourable for that, you could turn the UK into a pharmaceutical centre of excellence, for example. So you attract a pharmaceutical company to the UK on favourable rates. Then the argument is, I suppose you can come in here, do all the R&D, produce the stuff, well, but you can't ship it out because you're on tariffs. So there's a positive, there's also a negative. But you could do your R&D here, and then you can manufacture it somewhere else. In Ireland, for example, they have a cracking pharmaceutical sector. Or you could do your automotive R&D or your aerospace R&D here, and manufacture that overseas. There's nothing stopping you doing that. So that's where the positives could come from, is creating centres of excellence. But again, there's a dwell time and a lead time to this. So you can't just eradicate unemployment, because the skill set will be different. So if you decided, for example, to create an automotive centre of excellence, you need automotive engineers and automotive expertise. That takes a number of years to get. It's not a quick fix. So it's a longer term game you're playing. So there's going to be an amount of short term pain to get to the longer term objective, which is possible. If you look at countries like Taiwan that have turned themselves into high-tech R&D centres of excellence, that didn't happen overnight. The Taiwanese government, they took a longer-term view. So I suppose in a way the government need to figure out, have they got the money in the bank and the will of the British people to take that bit of pain for 5 to 6 years, for example, to set up these centres of excellence. And then conversely, will they be set up in the right areas with the right infrastructure to make impact into unemployment and areas of deprivation? We all see the big thing in the UK, and it's not for this, and we'll get into it, but the Northern Powerhouse and the struggles with everything being centred around London. There's a potential opportunity with Brexit and the redistribution of wealth. I don't want to get into that too much, but if you're creating these things, to put them in the right place, longer term.
So playing the long game then?
It's the only way to get a positive out of it.
Okay.
But there's a lot of short-term pain in getting there, potentially.
I guess the final question that we talked about it a little bit, but do you reckon collaborative research will be strained tremendously by the UK leaving?
Only if you let it, I suppose. And I suppose that's the fundamental thing across the whole of Brexit. There's a couple of things as we need to bear in mind with all the answers, and this one is Brexit is only going to be an absolute catastrophe if we go no deal, and really the chances of that happening, I would suggest, are quite slim. And I've no view on that in terms of culpability and people being empowered to make decisions on behalf of the people. It shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
If Brexit happens with a deal, then arguably this conversation is a completely different conversation, because we won't be anywhere near a doomsday scenario, because things will still be the same. There's also a third view that covers both of those areas, is you can sit around and you can moan about it and you can say, I voted to stay in and I'm being forced to come out and it's going to be bloody awful and the world's going to end. But it's only going to end if you let it end. There's always a way around everything. And in terms of collaborative research, will I stop dealing with the people I deal with now? It is highly unlikely, very much highly unlikely. And research should go beyond, in a food term, the farm gate. It should be the whole supply chain. So if we're researching supply chains correctly, and we just look around this table that we have in front of us now, we've got stuff that's made all over the world here. So we should be collaborating with people, not just in Europe, but in Asia Pacific regions, in the Americas, and so on. So there's an opportunity for us to stop becoming so reliant on researching with our neighbour and forcing us to go outside of our comfort zone.
Do you reckon that's the same for other countries, though? Do you reckon they feel the same?
What, the need to collaborate with us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're only going to collaborate. I suppose you've got to be quite honest and frank about it. You're only going to collaborate with something if there's a win for both persons.
Yeah.
So you've got to ask, what does UK PLC have that people in the Americas or Asia Pacific regions or the Middle East or the Africas, what do we have that they need? Why would we collaborate with these people, and why would they collaborate with us? So that's where we need to fundamentally look at. There's almost a branding exercise that needs to be done for everyone in the UK really to say that there's a lot of this stuff. There's a danger with a lot of this stuff when you look at some of the Brexit arguments being put forward that some people are harking back to the colonial days,
which is a thing you really don't want to go back to.
No, it's not. But that seems to be where people are going, or the good old times with Dunkirk spirit of the war. That's two periods in time where you wouldn't want to go back to, but. And you got to ask, do we want to be seen like that and come across like that? Which no, we damn well don't. And what is it then that we've got to offer? It's all well and good saying we have knowledge and we can trade with these people, but you've got to have something to trade.
Right.
That's it. And if so our thing here is supply chain logistics. So our research, we can research stuff leaving China, for example, and we can research it arriving in the UK, but because it landed in Rotterdam, or it flew via Schiphol Airport, or flew via Charles de Gaulle Airport, we're missing links out the supply chain and visibility, both from a physical supply chain and a research of supply chain. It means we actually effectively have nothing to export now.
Yeah.
Because we can't even see our supply chain, so we can't research it. So why would you want to deal with it? So it's a difficult one. It's a very difficult one. I don't want to.
Especially if the majority of businesses in the UK don't have anything to offer. And there might be a few shining examples. It's not exactly the biggest open arm welcome, is it, to other people in other countries?
Unless we become a service industry, but I suppose it's a different argument. I think there's a lot of things that we have to offer here in the UK in terms of businesses, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we only have a lot to offer because we've built close collaborative ties with Europe. And a classic example of that is automotive. We look at the automotive industry in the UK, it's not the way it was back in the days when we had our own brands in the UK. It's a different things have moved on. As a collective, the automotive industry has moved on, and brands have died off and moved away. But we have significant plants in the UK pumping out cars by the thousands by the week. Majority of those parts come in from Germany. They're coming from overseas. So don't lose sight of the fact that we've got automotive expertise in this country, but we're beholden and reliant on companies such as Bosch and Siemens to supply parts to these people to build the cars, to assemble the cars over here. And it's the same thing with our aerospace industry. Anything over here, it's parts based. It's all well and good saying we're going to create manufacturing over here. You can't manufacture stuff if you don't have the parts to do it.
Particularly, I would imagine the prices might go up for those parts, right?
Could do if there's a tariff slapped on top,
which isn't very helpful for us.
You're quite simply not going to. I made a bit of a flippant comment earlier on about this. The only thing you can do as a business is move it into the area where there's no tariff. If you're building minis in Swindon, for example, and then 10% was put on top of every part, arguably 10% is being put on top of a mini. And then the whole product, the product itself gets exported with another tariff on top.
Exactly, yeah.
So you could be saying to BMW that your product now is it's 20% more expensive than it was yesterday. They're not going to weather that for long. Over the years, the amount of drop in sales moved the plant. There's nothing here. In effect, if all the stuff's coming in, if it's been assembled here and it's being shipped in, there's eventually a longer term saving to be made. Because if you move the plant closer to where the materials are being manufactured.
And I guess that has social impact as well. Because if those businesses move, there's less jobs and more unemployed people.
Yeah, and so the only way around that is for the government to do a deal with Europe to say that we'll give you a preferred tariff. So you end up exporting. You basically be where you are now. You end up in a no tariff situation. So we're no better off than we are now. So in terms of you protect the jobs, you keep the jobs, of course, and you keep the manufacturing, but you're not financially better off. There's not much more money going into the government coffers from import tax.
Exactly.
Because you've had to do a special deal with Europe to maintain the plants in the UK.
So there's no big change there.
Not that, apart from the fact that I think one of the things we can protect our borders more effectively than we can now, which is a whole other
that's a whole other
podcast about boats coming in, is it? And the percentage of people that aren't European migrants in the country, so which hasn't been talked about much.
I guess the final question I'm going to ask you is because it's the 15th of January right now.
Yep.
The episode comes out on the 18th. Big deal. The vote on the bill, whether it goes through or not, is today. Say that we decide that we want a second referendum, or Brexit just gets scrapped.
Yeah.
Will there be an impact on relationship between Europe and the UK, even though we've now decided we don't want to do that.
Arguably, in my normal flippant style, it's a bit like walking into your wife one morning over breakfast and telling her you want a divorce. And then telling her the next day, actually, I've changed my mind. For the rest of your married life, there's going to be an element of, is this likely to crop up again? So there's going to be an element of trust damage, I would suspect, which again is a key thing in supply chains, communication and trust. I suppose the one saving grace from a company point of view is most company leaders are pragmatic enough to realise that it's not the company leaders that have called for this. Some may haven't, but it's not companies as a whole that have called for Brexit. It's the will of the people. I don't know where it goes from there, and it is a bit of dangerous because it means we're potentially setting a precedent now to say that every decision that is made, we just keep voting for until we get the right decision, which is great if we're playing in the World Cup because we just keep playing the game until we get the result we want. So,
exactly.
But it is a little bit dangerous, and I know that it's the whole dodgy area of democratic society. And I'm one of those people. I didn't want us to leave Europe, but if we're doing it under democratic vote, then we have to acknowledge that. And I'm not quite sure how we deal with that going forward. I'm not quite sure how you reverse this. I don't think a second referendum is the right thing to do. Actually, I don't know what is the right thing to do, and I don't think anyone does. And anyone that says that they do is quite frankly a liar, because we've never been into this area before, and you can't forecast. There's a great professor, as we close on this piece of it, Professor Hal Lee, who's a supply chain guru in the States, and he said all forecasts are 50% incorrect or correct, depending on which way you look at it. So it doesn't matter which one of us sit here with all the doomsday scenarios, we're always going to be half wrong or half right.
Yeah.
Because you can't forecast anything exactly. So with this Brexit as a geopolitical risk, how you get over, how you repair the damage of not coming out. If today they decide not to come out of Europe, that potentially has a whole problem with business in the UK as well. Because it's like, will it happen again? Now, I don't know enough about it. I'm assuming there'll be, if they revoke Article 50, there'll be some sort of deal done or something that says you can't re-trigger Article 50 for a number of years or something like that, I heard. I don't know the full facts, I'm not an expert on that, but there'll be something along those lines somewhere that does that. But again, there's a local issue then in the UK.
And a bit of trust issues as well.
Government can't be trusted, business, I don't even want to think. So I made a comment this morning, walked in the office joking, okay, it's all over today, we won't be leaving, Brexit's over, what are we going to be talking about tomorrow? Well, tomorrow we're going to be talking about a new government, we're going to be talking about the UK democratic system is broken. You can just see where this is going to go, and it will just escalate, it will just keep going on and on and on. But it will give the comedians something to talk about.
Yeah, which is great. So. Which is what it's all about, really. So, as long as we can laugh while we...
I think you have to. I think if you took it too serious, then I think you would have bang yourself against the wall. So.
Well, on that note, unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you, Liam, for joining us today. Where can people find you to discuss these matters further on social media? Well,
I have my Twitter account, which is @Liam Fassam. I think that's how the Twitter thing works, and I'm sure there's other social media things that will be attached to this podcast.
Yeah, well, I'll just add them on
LinkedIn or something like that.
If you check the bio, we'll have them on there.
Oh, of course, we have the University Research Institute website thing as well, don't we? So,
of course, yes.
Whatever I call it thingy, whatever the technical thing for that is. So.
I believe it is the thingy, yes. You can find Societal on Twitter @societal_, LinkedIn and Facebook. You can also find out more about us via our website, which is www.societal.org.uk. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon.